I'm delighted that we are joined by Ruth Ben-Tovim for this um, amazing session. I know it'll be amazing, in which she will explain to us some of the work she's been doing recently, which is a kind of transferable imagination practice, place-based, called Town Anywhere. So Ruth, I'm going to hand over to you and yeah, let you take over and I'll carry on letting people in.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Hannah, for inviting me, and really glad to be here. Thanks for showing up. And I'll just introduce myself a little bit and then talk about how I suggest that we use the hour and a half. This session goes on till 4:30. You may or may not want to stay for the whole of it. So I'm an artist and an activist and a community facilitator. And my background is in theatre as a theatre maker, collaborating and creating initially immersive theatre. And then I left the formal arts sector and decided to work more in the public realm and set up an arts organisation called Encounters. And we did about 80 or 90 socially engaged, ecologically engaged projects working in the arts and non-arts sector, using disused shops, mobile spaces, the street, the community garden, hospitals, lots of different places, really focusing on past, present, and future, and how we can create what I've called co-authored artworks that evolve as people add to them, and that they can only be created by people who are present in that space. And really, that's what I want to speak about today, is one of those projects or processes, which is called Town Anywhere, that doesn't exist without people in the room. And it was initially developed through the transition network movement, transition movement. Transition is, most of you might know, but they're grassroots organizations across the world who were set up to look at how do we transition away from peak oil, but do that in a regenerative, connecting, kind of joyful way as well. So I thought that about what I would do today is a kind of behind the scenes tour. Like, I'm going to share with you my tricks, not the tricks, but I'm going to share with you the backstage detail really of this process, which some of you I know on here know about, I've seen, and lots of you won't know anything about it necessarily. So yeah, that's what I want to do. And recently, Town Anywhere has happened in Hull, Bristol. It's about to happen in Tooting in London, in New Mills, all in very different commissioning contexts with different organisers, different people. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that later, about commissioning context, maybe funding. And then in the last half hour of this session, through a chat with Hannah and I, that I would really love to open more of an open conversation about a question which I keep coming back to, which is how can we time travel and create processes for imagining the future in a way that the author Vanessa Andriotti from Hospicing Modernity suggests, a way that enables us to walk the tightrope between naive hope and desperate hopelessness about the future. And I don't have the complete answers about how we do that, but that's the mission that I'm on, of how we can do that. And to some extent, Town Anywhere is in different ways trying to find a way that we can respond to that. But first of all, I'm gonna put in the chat a film of Town Anywhere that we did recently in Hull. And some of you might have already seen that. If you have, then you could get a cup of tea. It's 6 minutes long, the film. And because of glitching and everything, I'm suggesting that everyone just switches off their, goes on mute, and then we have a watch of this together in a second. And at the same time, if anybody has got if you've all got a bit of paper and a pen, can you make sure you've got that? It could be a felt tip pen. Don't worry too much about it for something that we'll need a bit later. So is that okay with everybody? Everybody's got the link. And let's watch the film, and then I'll see you back here and we'll unpack it. Okay, so this is what I really want to unpack a little bit today. And also, it's really lovely that my colleague and fellow facilitator on Town Anywhere, Lucy Neal, who's in that movie, is also here. So as well. And yeah. So what I thought that I would do, thank you for your comments on that. What I thought that I would do would be just to talk a little bit about and dissect the whole process really in this seed exchange. So I'm going to just share my screen. So here we are in Town Anywhere, rehearsing the future. And I'm going to share with you, as I said, what I'm calling the DNA of Town Anywhere. So this is, as a designer and as an artist and facilitator, this is what's underneath that process that you might be able to have seen in what you have watched. Part of what we look at in Town Anywhere is, as a facilitator, the different tones that we can use as a way of how we are as facilitators in a process like this matters. It's not just the form, it's how we hold ourselves, it's the energy we bring, it's how we invite people to participate. And we've really evolved that there's 3 key tones in Town Anywhere. One is like a storyteller, somebody who's in the detail. We're going traveling, we're going here, we're doing this. And then there's like the kind of the guide who's a bit like, do this, because there's a lot of layers that you'll have seen. It's a whole day. There's quite a lot of instructions. So how do I do that? So it's almost like a neutral guide. I'm here to help. And then there's a sort of ceremony leader. So quite a lot of Town Anywhere is these points at which we're asking and inviting people to step out of their 2024 selves and enter into this imaginal space. And how do we hold that space for others is, as facilitators, something that we're looking at. And also, how do we become a bit like a channel so that we're allowing the kind of bigger picture, the unknown, we're allowing the spirit of what is between people and their imagination to be able to be present. And so we see that as a bit more like, it's serious play, it's like a ceremony. And then we've been running an apprenticeship program in Hull, and part of that would be about training and speaking to people about how can we move between those roles. And then another bit of DNA that I use under here is these themes of design themes, really, that we're looking at the past, present, and future. And that will happen throughout the Town Anywhere journey as we go through it in a minute. The body, heart, and mind, we need these different capacities at these times to come into play about how we're going to navigate the future. So again, the design is how is my body here? There's quite a lot of moving around the space, which gets us out of our head. How is my heart in here? Where's my thinking? And we move between those a lot. And then this is a 5 dimensions, which I need to honor. There's a practice that I did called movement medicine. And it's looking at these dimensions of relationship, which is where this comes from. My relationship with myself, my relationship with others, my relationship with community and ancestors, descendants, and the web of life. And really that sense that often in consultation, visioning, or other civic processes, we often go straight for the community one. Tell me what you think about your town square. Tell me what you want here. Tell me how you imagine the whole picture. And actually, we often forget. Sometimes people haven't had much time to even connect with themselves or to build up this layer of connection. So in Town Anywhere, I think one of the successes of it is that we build up the layers of engagement and involvement slowly using these dimensions, and also particularly this sense of ritual and ceremony, that can do so much for us. It's a holding space that allows us to explore things together. My screen's just gone again. So I'm going to talk about a little bit of Town Anywhere that we did recently in Bristol for a festival. And Town Anywhere always starts with a framing. It could be a year, 2035, we're going to be doing one in Tooting, it's 2040. We did one at the transition, which was 2030. And then this framing in Bristol, they chose that it would be a fair, restorative, thriving town that cares for future generations and all beings. So we've done different versions where we would work with a commissioner or we would work with a local group to choose, they would choose the date and they would also choose the framing that can be quite specific to the issues, the aspects that they're working on, what's important to them in that moment. So it's like this can be changed in relationship with the people who want this process. And we've had a zero carbon town, a town of inclusivity and connection, various different things that we can set it's like we set a point for a future, and that framing really then underpins the day. So as we go through it, there's going to be a couple of little bits where I'm going to ask you to join in and you can experience this a little bit here. So, oh, here we go. So this is when we went into a space. It always starts empty, as I shared with you before. That's very important for me, that we're starting in an empty space. And then we invite people into the space, into the future. It's gonna go back. Here we go. And in this time when we're inviting people into the future, we are asking people to look into the unknown, to look into what they are unsure about at that moment, and to step forward into a place. We have a script that we do, which I'm happy to share at some point. And we imagine people to look forward into the future here. The next step is that we invite people to find a place that they can call home in the room. They have a blackboard, a chair, some chalk. So this sense of the first dimension here. Here's people finding a space in the room. And then we ask people, what is making you thrive here in 2035? People, places, nature thrive when given plenty of love and attention. Here you are in 2035. What is making you thrive? So, and then people write it down. So I would just like to invite you all, just for a moment, just to imagine that we're in 2035, and on your bit of paper, just to imagine what it might be making you thrive. And to write that down. And to just you can show a little grid video. You can just put it up and just have a look at each other's. Don't think about it too much. In 2035, in this place, but here, in this place of a fair, restorative, thriving town that cares for future generations and all beings, what is making you thrive? And let's just do that just for a moment. Just hold that up. Hold up your piece of paper so that other people can see it. Maybe write it big enough. Yeah, a sense of purpose. And people have a little look around at each other's. Just write it, hold it up. People surrounding me who ask questions and listen. Lovely. Have a little look around. Imagine we're in the space together, holding it up and clicking. I always like to try and extend the possibilities of Zoom a little bit. Walking in fresh air. Lovely. if you're off camera, you might want to come on to show us, have a look around. Nice. Okay, so we'll come back. And what I wanted to do is just to read you out the invitation that we give to people before they journey here, just so you've got a context of what we do. So I'm going to do that now. I meant to do this. We come to bring you news that time travel to 2035 is possible today, that there's a small window of opportunity for us to step into the future. There are many futures that lie ahead of us, quantum threads of possibility that stretch out in many directions. Today, we'll be exploring the future that resulted from our collectively doing everything we could have done to create a fair, regenerative, and thriving town that cares for future generations of all beings. Here, in 2024, the dominant system that we're living and working within focuses on runaway growth, puts people first, and is dangerously overstepping planetary boundaries. It's a system where wealth is concentrated in the hands of a few, and injustice, inequality, and individualism still dominates. Today, we're going to allow ourselves to imagine that the different movements for change, the networks, projects, and organizations that exist here in 2024 have worked together to create a cascade of imaginative, remarkable, and positive change by 2035. Let's imagine that so much has been done over these 11 years to take responsibility, reduce harm, and stay within the boundaries of our planet and work together. It could be the making of us. And for one day, we have a chance to time travel together to this imaginary town called Anywhere. So we'll go on. So what's making you thrive? This is what some other people wrote. So here we're really at this personal first dimension, me, my home, the wider world that me, am connected to. And then we go up a level. We ask people to find a neighbor. And on this blackboard, I'm going to ask you in a second to go into breakout groups, that we tell each other a personal memory or story. Just going to stop sharing this screen for a second. And at this level, building up to the neighbor, like we know that in most of our lives, how important that sense of your very local, your neighbor, who might not be your best friend, but who's somebody who that you see every day, somebody that you're connected to. And in part of our imagination process, this idea of how we're building up these connections, and also in the process of Town Anywhere, how slowly we build up people to be able to participate and start to imagine. Because let's face it, we're saying, here we go, walk into the future, here's 2035, what happens then? How do we really create the space for people to begin to imagine? And this is this building up layer. So what I'm going to ask you to do, which is what we always do in Town Anywhere, because we're traveling together a little bit now for the next half an hour or so, it's to get to know somebody else. We're going to put you into a breakout group. Hannah, I would actually do it for, let's do it for 2 people. Be in this breakout room for 7 minutes, and you take turns to tell each other a personal memory or story based on one of these themes. Just say hello. We don't need big introductions at this stage. And you have a look and you think, okay, if Justin is here on my screen, I might go, okay, Justin, can you tell me a story about strangers? So then you would tell me a personal memory or story about strangers. I just listen. We're practicing active listening. You listen with your whole attention rather than thinking about where you're going. And then you tell me something, I say thanks, and you look at that list and you would say, Ruth, can you tell me a story about one of those? Okay. So this is in Bristol. This is people sharing stories, strangers connecting as you've just done, generally opening the heart, bringing ourselves into the space. For me, it's always really important, particularly in a large scale process, that people come in and speak. Often in that intimate way, they find themselves in sharing, talking, connecting. So, as these people have done, I'd love you in the chat just to try and find a summary of your story and write a heading. I heard a story about. Don't think about it too much. It's like, I heard a story about a time when a person, I heard a story about a young woman who, blah, blah. So just let's all just do that, take a couple of minutes, and then I'll keep unpacking. And just type it in the chat. Lovely. Beautiful. And as they come, imagining that you're moving around, we can do that on Zoom, that you're just now taking in these stories that you're hearing. These are the people who are here with you on this little Zoom moment, as they are in the Town Anywhere moment at here on this journey. And just notice at this moment, reading those, how you feel. Just how, because that's also a part of it when we were speaking before about this DNA of engagement in this imaginative journey. I know in myself, we're not going to have time to open it out. I can feel softening. I can feel a kind of expansion. I can feel connection, and I can feel tender. I'm feeling tender reading those as well. And this is happening all the time in our lives, of course, with our neighbours and in this future town where we are. It's like the foundations we've laid by doing this activity. And then we ask people to get together with their neighbours, with a couple of other neighbours, and start to work at a street level to begin to keep visioning this fair, regenerative, thriving streetscape, neighbourhood scale. And we say, we give people a bit longer. How could you work together to create a street community that supports people, places, and nature now to thrive? And they take their blackboard. I'm a bit obsessed with blackboards. And they have a conversation about this, and they're drawing these ideas out, having that conversation. This is beginning the really challenging skill of collaborating. You know, how do we collaborate in the future? How are we going to collaborate to change the paradigm that we're in? How do we collaborate in our imagination? I mean, imagination has tended to be an individual act. And I know that a lot of what we speak about in the imagination infrastructure and this Joseph Rowntree inquiry is this collective imagination. And this is what's happening here. It's the muscle, and it's hard sometimes and challenging. How do we get all those ideas down? And so we use drawing, talking, time, and people share their ideas. And then we go round and have a look at each other's. So for me, always this playing between the witness and the participant. How can I witness something? How am I participating? It blurs those boundaries that in our society and civic life are often so hard between the people who are participating and the people who are just witnessing, the people who are the bystanders and the people who are engaged, and blurring those, getting people to rehearse, I can be active here. My voice can count. And then how do I sit back and realize that I'm one voice in many, one part of a whole? So then we go to town. That's what it shows in the film. We go to town, we leave messages and requests around the different themes of the town. You'll have seen it in the video, those long blackboard where people are going at this point to write, what would you like to see? And this is a sense of inviting people to imagine without having to fully think, oh, I've got to realize this. Because a lot of imagination I've found is quite bound by people going, oh, we can't do that in our town, or oh, I couldn't possibly do that in my role or with the knowledge that I have. So here, people go around the town. These are some of the themes that you saw in the video: goods, food, green, healthcare, governance, all the things that make up the infrastructure of a town. And we invite people to go round and to leave a message for the town designers. What would you long to see here? What are your ideas? And we've got music playing. We DJ through this whole thing, really. So this sense of bringing in music as a way of getting out the way, getting our minds out the way. And then this shift happens. Go back, have a look at the blackboards, have a look at what the town, your community has asked, and to see if there's anything that calls you to fill that request. So again, this is this sense of interconnection. So instead of me just going, I've got my idea and off I go, this sense of how am I responding to things that people have requested, and then how can I bring in my own skills, my own interests. So we ask people, what role would you like? And we asking people to say, perhaps it's different than what you were doing in 2024. You know, it's a different role. We're here, we're in 2035. So then we encouraging people's kind of longing, maybe the things that they're doing and volunteering, we open it more, maybe where they want to be. And they write their role on a blackboard and then they get together. I love this one. And some of the roles that got created in Bristol and Can Do, it's like, well, why not have those in a town? We're so used to quite specific roles. Some of these are, yeah, why not? Here we go. So once we have gone round with the blackboards, people go for a little look. Oh, your role could fit with my role. They go back to the theme that their roles came from. And this is then when we say to people, off you go. We want you to build a representation of your town, of your venture, big enough for people to visit. Here's Rob Hopkins, who's in a few Town Anywheres, has been our town clerk. People come up when they've decided their venture and they get a little lot and a plot, mark it down on a map, and then they start building. And this is when we have liftoff. This is in one of those, the DNA moment. This is really about the hands come in, the haptic. How now am I beginning to play and experiment through doing, through making? So it comes out of my individual idea and role into the collective venture, into our collective hands. And there's a charter to fill in, which asks people, I've got them here that I'm typing up at the moment, but it asks you, what's your overarching proposal? How is it contributing to the town? So it's another way of people thinking through some of their ideas. Cardboard, scissors, sticks, string, very simple materials that we do so that people don't get too distracted by, oh, I want a pink or I want a blue. There's something about the cardboard, the sticks, the blackboards, 4 different color marker pens, some tape. That's it, really. Scissors. And then this sense of ceremony. Lucy, who's on here, is always brilliant at designing and finding and adapting to a Town Anywhere official opening moment. And we have a town mayor. And we ask somebody will you be the town mayor? And we ask them to open the town, to say a few words. So that's a moment when everyone's been making. But again, these collective points in this whole process are so important. And we often, I feel, in our lives, we're at these moments of celebration that goes, wow, we've just spent an hour making a town. Let's mark that moment. How do we marking these really important moments in times which are really challenging? Often we need to mark the moments and to celebrate and to find the joy in that moment. So this was here, we had the mayor, and we always have a cake, a Town Anywhere cake that is then cut. And as people are going round, they have some cake. We've had the joy of the celebration, and then we ask people to swap, go round, have a look at other people's ventures. How could your venture work with my venture? So this again is this sense of not getting too preoccupied with my venture, but beginning to see the systemic way that this whole town system could start to work together. What's the reciprocity? How can my venture start to go, oh, I'm a food venture, and over there, that's a space venture, and that's a solidarity, and this is here, and how do we start to work together? And this was one of the very first reasons when the Town Anywhere was commissioned, was because the transition movement 10 years ago, or a bit longer, people were setting up their own transition town projects across the world. And the sense was we can get quite isolated in the work that we're doing when we're in a dominant system that's moving in one direction. So what would it be like just for a day, for an afternoon, if we got to see how a whole interconnected, thriving system works together? And that was the idea, that was why it was commissioned, so that all those transition networks from around the world, 350, the first one, could see and experience what it's like. And in a way that still stands. There's been a lot of developments. Many of those ideas are more commonplace, but the crisis and the emergency has also accelerated in the same way. So you turn back to your venture, you see how it's evolved. This is people in a dialogue. We ask them, record it on a blackboard. What's your exchange been? It's beautiful chaos at this point. And some of these are very, very serious. The serious play, people's ventures in terms of that they're really thinking through. This is an assembly, and all of these have different pillars that they think that there should be an assembly, outdoors assemblies discussed. They really think down to some of the detail about it. And they exchange here. And then we start to wind back. We start to think about coming home, coming back. And we ask people to write a postcard to themselves in 2024. So we're doing this time travel, past, present, future. We're standing in 2035. And for a moment in that experience, after we've had all of this, seeing the whole system connect, we say, write yourself a postcard, write back to your 2024 self. What did it open up? What did you see? What are you taking away? What would you advise your 2024 self to take? And for me, this bending time travel, when really time is not linear, as many of us would know, that this sense of the opportunity that being in 2035 affords you to be able to look back to 2024, even though it's just a few hours ago, it's actually, you know, however many years ago at that point, if we're writing it. And people write a postcard to themselves. And then we time travel back to 2024. Slowly. This can be quite emotional for people. We slowly time travel back, carrying the postcards, looking along the way. And then we invite people at the end just to take a look back into what's being created. Like there, we've created Town Anywhere. We started empty, and now it's full of your imagination, of your longing, of your ideas. And yeah, this takes place. I think there'll be information there. So I'm going to stop sharing there. And that is some of the behind the scenes world of Town Anywhere. And I just wanted to open, if there's any specific questions, maybe we'll do that for 10 minutes, and then we could open this more broader questions. And I'd really like to invite Lucy to answer some of these questions as well with me if they come up about that, if anyone has those. Yeah. Hi, Deborah.
Hiya.
Hi.
Thank you. And and Lucy and everybody else who's been involved in this really amazing work. I was just wanted to quick ask about whether you've done any of this work in schools, because we're doing lots of work in schools and it would be perfect like context for this kind of work.
We haven't done it in a school, Deborah. No, we've done it with, we usually say we've done it for kind of age 13 plus. But when we were in Hull doing the apprenticeship program, some of them were thinking about how do we adapt this or how could we adapt that for schools. So I'm really interested in a conversation about that. I think it could be really interesting.
I think maybe this is on behalf of everyone. Your contact details were flashed up really quickly on the screen there.
Sure. I'll put them in again.
Thank you.
Ruth, I think it was Myri next, and then
Myri, yeah.
I didn't catch who that first question was, but it's deeply connected to the question that I'm about to ask, because I am using the Andriotti Education 2048 in a pre-service, year one pre-service teacher education class. And my question was, I wanted to know a little bit more about those who show up to these events, because it is different when now as teacher, I'm saying, let's use this imagination, but you didn't necessarily sign up to use this imagination. So what have you experienced as some of the maybe like the stuck points where people may have more struggles? That it gets great to talk about the generative aspects, but I want to prepare myself to, I mean, you talked about the emotion at this level, or, you know, when we come back to 2024 and those kinds of things. But yeah, if you could just talk about some things that you've reflected on, how people respond and how we can support them through those areas that they might feel a little bit hesitant or stuck. I think you're on mute.
Thanks for that question. You know, I would love to do a hospicing 2048 context town anywhere, but I think it would need building up. You know, so at the moment, one of the things we're going to go on to talk about is that the moment we're being quite reactive in who wants town anywhere in terms of so to some degree, and that we're hoping to expand that with a bit of, you know, to look at that. But it really depends on who is commissioning it. So in Hull, this was a link between, it was an ideas fund, which is a link between academics and the large voluntary sector. They're a kind of mutual aid network. They've got the Poverty Truth Commission there. And they, in effect, recruited the people to come along for that. And that was about 200 people. And in Hull, because of their networks and because of their very active voluntary sector, they managed to get a really diverse, quite a very well representative mix of the town. And I think that so there's really three stages really of Town Anywhere. One is the event itself, which I think we've learned through doing it a lot of times, that can really build up people's participation, even if they're a bit reluctant at the beginning, because it's slow, as we've just done a bit ourselves. So by the time people are cutting and sticking, they found themselves participating. And so the only, possibly the first boundary is that sense of standing. And we have a ribbon and we cut it and we say, okay, go in. But I feel as if that part of it, really, we've done it enough times that it can, throughout it, weave people in. And because we're going from me to we to out to in, there's time for self-reflection and with other people and back to myself and with everyone else. So it's quite held in that way. I think that the first part is the recruitment, like who is coming to Town Anywhere and who has commissioned it, who wants it, and then how are they going to get people to come in? And then the third part that we're working on is what happens afterwards. What support can we give from a Town Anywhere perspective about how this data, how this information that I'm doing, you know, where could that go? How is that going to intervene in those systems? But to some extent, that's also really, it's about empowering the people who've commissioned it to say, you know best about how this could work. But I just want to very briefly pass over to Lucy, who's just in the middle of very much the first part of it, which is in Tooting, where it's going to be happening in a few weeks' time. And so they're also at the moment very actively in terms of how do we get 100 people in the room, you know, what are we finding about that? So Lucy, I'm sorry to throw you in, but I think that's quite a relevant question. If that answers your question, Myri, a little bit.
Yeah, hello everybody. Yeah, I am as terrified as I am excited about doing Town Anywhere Tooting on October the 21st. Why? I was party with folk setting up Transition Town Tooting in 2008, and since that time really have been very kind of personally committed to this kind of how do we build an open space for this collective imagining, which is not fantasy, but is actually something that we bring back to the everyday life, which allows us to kind of see broader, wider, deeper, more harnessed to the possibilities of change. So the idea that all the networks and all the work that we've been doing in TTT over these years, and Tooting's kind of very connected, and that's not just us, that's lots and lots and lots of other players and organizations. But there's a kind of proof of the pudding feeling about actually doing this in your hometown where you belong. So we don't know everybody coming, and we know that when everybody comes into the room at the beginning, they're not going to know everybody, even if they think they might do. But this preparation stage that Ruth's laid out is about going to your networks, going to individual care organizations, health, education, shops, retail, standing outside the Broadway with a giant logo on Monday, which is what we're going to do. It's getting the word out to get the sign up. And sometimes there's an instant, I've heard about this is great, I'm coming. And sometimes there's a real, I don't get this. And what Ruth just said is that people find themselves participating. Is something that I know that we can trust the process with that. But anyway, I mean, the truth of the matter is that in about 2.5 weeks' time, we'll be the wiser. What happens when it ends? Ruth, in Hull and elsewhere, we're having a breakfast the next morning. We've got 5 councillors, we've got the mayor coming. So in terms of policy and resources, and in addition to some of kind of the key community players, change makers, etc., this possibility of just reflecting and gathering the insights when they're very, very fresh, and understanding what could be possible now that might not have felt so possible. And it's not, sometimes people want you to come up with really kind of concrete outcomes, like what happened after in Hull? But actually, as Ruth has suggested, it's much more about this feeling that people have inside about, their own capacity to take permission, and that everybody, the boundaries are blurred in civic life between those people who have power and resources and make policy decisions, and those people who actually are already doing and getting on with it. But actually, how do you create a world in which the dynamic of that is harnessed in one day? And I think I'm just going to be in bits blubbing at the back of the hall by the time we step back into 2024.
Thank you. Thanks, Lucy. Thanks for that. Yeah, Esther, that's okay to move
on. Thank you both. And Lucy, did I understand that Tooting is maybe your hometown? Is that what I was hearing? Okay, because this is sort of where my question is going to. Is in communities where they're even smaller. I saw that the Tooting community is about 20,000 people. If you're looking at more like 4,000 to 10,000 people, where yes, you don't know everyone, but you do have community conflict that exists already in a room. Are there ways in which you found this, for example, the early visualization helps people let go of, oh, well, I already know what Tom does because he's on utilities. And so how could he have anything to say about creative practice in education? And so I think that's something that I would hope this allows people to let go of, but would be curious if you all have insights on a good moment to introduce that.
We really say, we have a bit of a joke, which is, please take your lanyard off when you come in. It's not a joke, it's a kind of behind the scenes sense that we also say at the beginning, your whole self is welcome. You might have a professional role or a voluntary role or something else, put that behind you. And also, because it's Town Anywhere, that is the key. That when some people are talking, we're like, well, we're not in Hull, we're not in Tooting, we're in Town Anywhere. And the same, and sometimes, of course, throughout the day, people slip back, you know, and it's because sometimes there's 100 people in a room, or 50 or 40 people or 200, that when we have lunch, that's always the kind of danger point a little bit, because we try and have a working lunch and a collective lunch. And so we often say to people, you know, can you stay together? We've heard that here in 2040, that phone signal is really not working very well. Back to 2024, that you know, you don't want to interfere with the time travel airways. So we need to be careful. And then we've even said, which was quite in Bristol, we were saying, if you do find yourself talking about 2024, can you do it in the past tense? So it's a bit like if I hadn't seen someone for ages and I was saying, wow, how's your project going? Has that email been sent? You know, it could be like, wow, how did that project go that you were working on in 2024? You know, did that email? So there's a way that they start to see that all the time we're in a soft way trying to say, let's stay here in 2040 in Town Anywhere. And actually most people kind of buy into that a little bit. So that helps. Yeah. Okay, Kevin. Kevin, you're muted. Yeah.
Oh, there we go. It wasn't letting me unmute. Sorry. Thank you for all of this. So I'm coming from Ontario, Canada, and this might be something that either you, Ruth, or Lucy could maybe answer. Is the synergy in terms of the project I'm working on currently is incredible, and I'm wondering about logistics and practicalities about what kind of budget does it look like to pull something like this off? Is there a toolkit, or would we, you know, being from Canada, are we able to, would we be able to do something like this in, like, for example, I'm in Guelph.
I'm really glad you've asked that, Kevin, because I was going to say that anyway. So with Town Anywhere, because you'll have seen it's quite a complex process. It needs a lot of facilitation skills and experience, which many people might have. That's why I've invented an apprenticeship model. So in Hull, what happened is we delivered Hull. And at the moment, to deliver a Town Anywhere with 2 facilitators costs the commissioner about £5,000, which includes materials, fees, time, some travel. And then they need to find us accommodation, whether that's somewhere else. So that's what we do on that basis. And then when we did it in Hull, we did it there, and then because they wanted to be able to deliver it, and I'm really interested in how we share our practice, but how we keep some of the quality of an experience for people. And this is what the seed funding from Joseph Roundtree is helping me look at, is how do we kind of cascade that. So we did a model that we have done successfully of an apprenticeship program, which is that anybody who has experienced Town Anywhere could then go on to an apprenticeship program, which is where I would train them, me or Lucy would train them in a live situation over a couple of days, including Zoom work. And then they would need to facilitate a Town Anywhere themselves as a team that we might do. And then we sign them off. And then now in Hull, there are 8 facilitators who can do Town Anywhere in Hull. So that means that for me, if somebody came to me, which they did actually, and said, can you do a Town Anywhere in Hull? I then said, actually, these are the people now in Hull that can deliver Town Anywhere. I don't need to do it. I don't need to do it in every single city or every single place in the world. But there is a sense of training. So the other thing is that we did an online Town Anywhere with 100 people. And so I'm thinking about, because there are people internationally who would like to learn about Town Anywhere. And it's not at the moment just a kind of, here you go, off you go, do it. There might be other things I'd be really happy to do that, but this isn't. It's too many layers, it's too complex. And as an artist, I'm like, there's a subtlety to it that I hope I've shared a bit of, that I would want people need to experience it properly in an embodied way, and then we can look at how can people be trained. But we have done an online version of Town Anywhere, which we could look to do again. So that might be a possibility that in Canada or on somebody else, we could do an online version. We did it where people had their paper and their cardboard and their sticks, and we did Padlets, and it was actually really a successful model in a very embodied way. I'm in my room making and you're over there making. So that could be a way that then that could happen. And then perhaps there could also be an apprenticeship training, and then you could do it. So that's what I want. That's what I need to be clear about, that at the moment, it's that's how it is. And some people have said, oh, could we do a 2-hour version, or could we do a 3-hour version? And for me, we're sort of saying, actually, it's got hundreds of hours of design in it. And at the moment, it's 6 hours. That's what it is. Other things could be an hour or 2 hours. So happy to chat, Kevin, about a Canada way that we could explore.
Yeah, I would love to, because like I literally have a meeting with Vanessa Andriotti on October 25th, and I come from our own Guelph transition town process that we developed here, and we're developing a Wellbeing Economies Alliance for Canada, and I was hoping that this transition town might be able to help us build that.
Okay,
so I will reach out.
Yeah, do that. Hannah.
Thank you. This is a quick one, and feel free to answer it quickly, Ruth. What happens if, and it's in the chat, what happens if people create a dystopian future? I
think that I would say, what do we mean by dystopian? I might need to challenge that. So, we did, again, another one in Hull, because we did 3 there, and somebody was really creating a context in which it was like, well, a lot of Hull's going to be flooded. And so we're creating a centre on sticks, and we're doing that. Or somebody was saying there's going to be a lot of climate refugees. How are we managing that? So for me, really, the framing is trying to set a frame, a fair, restorative, thriving town. Yeah. So we're not just saying, hey, come into 2035, and between this group of 50 people, 100 people, you're going to have to imagine what the future is. That's a little bit of our steering with the people who've commissioned it. So Lucy and I don't just decide. There isn't a blanket one. We're saying it's relational to agree that, but that is the thing that we're holding. And so actually what we found is that, funnily enough, it's more the other way, that some people say, well, it kind of looks like everybody's agreeing. And actually what we say is, well, perhaps underneath it all, these are they're not too woo-woo. They're not two things. They're things that actually people want. They're about connection. They're about exchange. They're about fairness. They're about inclusion. They're about me working with you. So in that way, we've had situations, and I'm really interested in it. How could we do Town Anywhere in a 3-degree neighborhood context? How could we do it in that way? How might we do it like has been explored in Birmingham? How could we do it in a sense of collapse, but where we're still doing everything we can to reduce harm? So yeah,
Ruth, just to add that this isn't a one-off. So it would be possible to do a follow-up where your frame becomes a bit tighter around housing, or actually you come down narrower into a framing that you want to draw on the experience and skills, but in a narrower frame. So as Ruth says, it's in setting the detail of that main frame at the beginning.
I'm feeling that there's kind of energy to keep going with questions and things. Should we keep going with that? I did talk about chatting about a question, so maybe we could just take one more question and then have 10 minutes on this opening. Okay, Celine.
Hi. Can you tell us a bit more about what sort of what you have discovered in terms of when you followed up or afterwards? I'm trying to not use the word outcomes, because I know that's not what but have you noticed changes, shifts? Are you trying to actively follow up on things? Yeah, I'm just curious about.
Perfect question for this moment. I mean, so Town Anywhere, we first did it 12 years ago in amongst, as I talked about, encounters and doing lots and lots of other projects. And then this year in particular, it's a bit like Town Anywhere has been kind of knocking on the door and going, I think that I need a bit more attention. I think that as the polycrisis accelerates the need for more ways that we can reimagine and work together become more heightened. And we did it in Hull and made the film that you've seen. That was a year ago only. And then since then, it's kind of, there's been a lot of interest, and we've done 4. So we are at the moment, thanks to the Seed Fund, we are doing exactly what you've just said, Celine, which is that we're going to interview these kind of 4 very different groups that have commissioned it, to try and understand why they commissioned it, what could have helped. We've also got a kind of evaluation form from some of the participants that we'll be following up to try and understand, what's happening to people when they go into town anyway. We have anecdotes, we've got anecdotes from 12 years ago when Rob Hopkins did it himself and came up with a brewery and a bakery that ended up together, and that manifested itself. And somebody in Bristol last week kind of said, you know what, me and my friends had been talking about a housing getting together. Now we're more adult and being in town anywhere and doing that. I'm going to call up my friends and we're really going to bring that idea back on. Or so there's sort of anecdotes of both external outcomes, which interestingly tends to be what people want, what's going to be made from it. And I think there is some of that, but also the internal outcome as well. How can we measure the capacities and competencies that are being developed for collaboration, for uncertainty, for dialogue, for imagination itself? So we are trying to measure those. And if there's any researchers there that would like to help us, please get in touch, because we are now trying to map this and offer it more widely. Okay, thank you. So just trying to get so I just thought that it would be great to just have a 10-minute conversation. So recently I did this at the Forwards Festival, and Rob Hopkins and myself had we were doing a talk about it. And one of the conversations that we came up between us was, and I'd love to hear what some of you have to say, and it links back a little bit to this walking the tightrope between naive hope and desperate hopelessness, is really this sense of, through our imagination practice, how can we not exacerbate the problem or the denial about our entanglement, the systemic violence, the limits of the planet, how bad things are. How can we not exacerbate that? How can we not just be saying, oh, it's global north green growth and we're all fine? How can we responsibly offer visioning processes that can guide a way? And I'm really curious about some of your responses to that. I know that one of the things that Vanessa Andriotti talks about, who I'm very influenced by, is this sense of, well, we need to do it with honesty, humility, humor, and hyper self-reflexivity. But it's how can we offer imaginative visioning processes that are responsible and are not exacerbating the problems. So let's do that. I'd love to hear from people. I don't have the answer. Justin.
Yeah, I don't think I have the answer either. Just a disclaimer before I say anything. But what came up for me was, I have like a kind of a shamanic practice, but also kind of hypnotherapeutic. And I noticed that like when I'm holding and guiding people through journey spaces, it's a deeply imaginative space full of visualization. But what we're trying to get them to do is to meet things that are hard to visually see in the present moment, so they can come into better contact with the realities of what's underneath themselves, life, each other, conflict, tension, pain, and to be able to really surface that in the context of being able to heal or just accept or allow or embrace or whatever that right quality or texture may be. And so when I feel into like even this town anywhere, not having experienced yet, I feel like how tangible it is to construct your vision into reality. The movement from having a sense of what could be to actually having the context by which to build it, even if it's just a model of it, feels like it is a could be an evolutionary leap or step in a very right direction. And so I just kind of think that something about that is like, yes, we're visioning the future or speaking from these future tenses or imagining, but what we're actually really doing is shifting and changing something about how we are experiencing the present moment. And that's very, very tangible and real.
Lovely, thank you. Kevin, if it's okay, I'm just going to see if anyone else wants to speak who hasn't spoken. Be great if anyone else.
I'll say something.
Libby, yeah.
First of all, just thank you for the whole experience and uplifting. Several people who've already echoed, like, this is a question to be held, I think, not just to be answered. So this is just a thought. But I think from doing dialogue work and from doing some design work that's more like design thinking based, engineering based, which doesn't really have any necessarily political lens, but includes people working at different power levels in the design. Some acknowledgement of identity without getting stuck in the identity can support how the imagining is happening. So can we acknowledge that we're coming from different sectors of this problem or challenge? Can we acknowledge there's power dynamics? Can we acknowledge there's a difference in who actually gets to make the choices when we leave? Depends on the project and where and how much, but allowing that to be like seen without, you can't have it not be a barrier, but you can have it be named. So then it could be worked with in the reimagining, or like the imagining gets to change based on the identities present, and even acknowledging which identities are not present in our collective, but who we're still designing for, even if they can't be present on that day.
Thank you. Anyone else who's not spoken? It's great to hear different perspectives.
Can I come in? Thank you so much, Ruth and Lucy and everyone, for arranging this. I'm wrestling with the question of how you bring people in who have very different worldviews and different assumptions about the future. So I'm working with people from across the spectrum on that, and some of whom would fundamentally not recognize the need for transition and who are part of the industries that are, you know, implicated in all sorts of things that we know about. So I'm trying to figure out a way to bring them into, you know, the collective team human response to this huge predicament we face, and make them welcome and figure out how they can be. So yeah, I suppose what my question is yeah, how can it be possible for people who have a fundamentally different worldview, different set of assumptions, to be part of this? Do you notice that in these sessions, and how do you avoid there being a kind of dominant unspoken set of norms that maybe limit certain people from saying things that they feel aren't socially acceptable or desirable in a context where there might be some kind of prevailing assumptions there? That makes sense.
Thanks, Julian. Lucy, do you want to say something?
Yeah, Ruth mentioned at the beginning that at the very outset, when people are gathered, we're inviting them to step into uncertainty and into time travel to 2040. So it would be absolutely impossible for anyone in the room to be sure about anything about 2040. And what they're taking with them is their love, their knowledge, their skills, their desire for, you know, where they are living and working, you know, to be a connected place. So in a world of the imaginary, you know, there are no rights and wrongs. So the everyday, if you like, hierarchies of knowledge or who holds the decision making, that's all gone, because everybody is starting with themselves. They then meet a neighbor, and the way that the process builds, I think, avoids those sort of specialist mastery knowledge questions, because at the point at which you've got some brown tape in your hand and you're quickly building a transport system or something like that, there is an extraordinary kind of equal playing field there. And I think that certain things that people might hold on to in terms of what they think is true of 2024, it is slowly, like kind of morning mist, it melts and people get very, very busy building this world. And I think that's the best that you can hope for, that in that process, certain insights come through, and also a certain humility, where suddenly an 8-year-old child has come up with an absolute bonanza idea of, you know, how a transport system needs to work or something like that. And I just, for me, that is just the complete power of how the imaginary renews and reinvents the real. And it's not just that we're traveling to the future, it's the fact that we're traveling back in time as well. And it's that journey, and what you're bringing back with you is a discovery, I think mostly about permission, is that we all carry this sort of incredible latent potential, but we're held back by all sorts of things. And Town Anywhere just releases that, and you can play the role that you've yearned to play, and learning comes into it quite a lot.
Thanks, everyone. I think I need to hand back to Hannah, but we could have had that conversation for a lot longer, and it was great to hear some of you.
Yes, thank you, everyone. And just to let you know that we kind of were a little bit quiet over the summer whilst people were away rather. But now we're back in the autumn. We've got lots coming up. We've got a meeting on the 17th of October. We've got a meeting on the 30th with Zuleika here, looking at trauma-informed bodywork and how we use that in imagination. So there's loads coming up. I've put the link in the chat. If you're not part of the mailing list, if you kind of found your way here through another route, do sign up so we can keep you in the flow of the different things that we're doing. And thank you all for coming. It's been wonderful, Ruth. Really appreciate it. And yeah, I'm going to Tooting. Don't know about you guys, but really looking forward to experiencing it in person. Have a lovely afternoon, everyone.